Welcome back to Small Brand Mentality, where we have conversations with folks who are here to create and disrupt in the running and outdoor industry as a whole. And this week we're joined by Terrence Diggs of D17. You may not be familiar with D17 just yet, but I want to introduce everybody to this part creative and marketing agency, part event production specialization, part clothing company. D17 sits at this intersection of creating experiences, creative content, and clothing to celebrate vignettes of an immersive lifestyle in culture, style, and movement. Now, Terrence sits at the helm of this operation, and we get to talk today about everything from his creative roots and his process to all the way into a partnership that he locked in with the Washington Wizards in the DC area. And we're going to go into everything from the running community as a whole and how he sees it to how to be a successful partner, especially early on. So please enjoy this conversation. This is par for the course of what we're going to talk about, because I feel like you're always trying to pioneer things and find new platforms, find new ways to express yourself. And I definitely want to talk about D17 and kind of set the stage here. But you were telling me just before this that the big theme that I want to talk about with you today is about partnerships, about collaboration, right? Finding that like mutual brand value. And you said that predates D17 with some projects you're working on when you're at Towson, right? College? Tell me what was going on that like opened that door to you.
At the time, like I feel like a lot of people don't know, but a lot of people do. So like I have my BFA, like in fine arts and communication. So I've always been an artist. I've always loved being able to bring in other ideas or people. Like I think I've always been some type of, I wouldn't say an innovator, but sometimes I don't know if it's just like the way my brain is wired. I see stuff so early on, but my biggest problem is like, maintaining it enough to kind of get on the waves and stuff. Like you had mentioned, I remember when I was like a junior in undergrad, I tried to start a podcast. This is 2015. Before podcasts were even a thing. I was like, I wanted to start a radio show. Because me and my friend Nick, shout out to him, we were talking about, we built an app together called Album Pop, and pretty much was like Canva before Canva was Canva, but it was on your phone. It was like a very, very, very like 4-layered Photoshop. You could take a picture, put a cruddy filter on it, and then put a parental advisory sticker on it. And that's when people are like, oh, you take a group picture and people would say, oh, we're going to drop it's a group picture. We're going to drop the hottest mixtape of 2014 or something. And we turned it into an app. And I was like, let's take it beyond. How can we build more of an app? And I was like, well, a lot of musicians were finding a lot of underground, like SoundCloud musicians. And we were like, well, let's just give them all free subscriptions to the app to make content on the app. And then we were like, well, we'll play your songs on the app when people log in. Oh, this is new, Little Buckets, whatever their song is. And they would make the art and we'd show it and they would have links to their SoundClouds and stuff like that. And I was like, oh, we should make a radio show and play all their songs, all underground. But I didn't know how to make a radio show. So we're like, let's make a podcast. And we tried it. And very early on, we were doing, asked my friend, we were doing 2,000-3,000 downloads like a week. We had like 7 episodes and then we kind of stopped because, it wasn't, we're like, nobody really cares. It's probably, and then you see stuff like, other platforms. You're like, man, I was doing that right here. Literally me and my friends with this same exact microphone on the Omni, mode, just sitting in a circle talking about music. And I feel like now it's kind of worked into my career of being able to like identify opportunity, which is like what I use with the brand and being able to, it's low key like an extension of myself and my own interests. But, there's always another company or person or entity that is looking for a connector that's organic, authentic, aligns. They bring a little bit of a cool factor. So it's like we kind of work as a brand, but also a little bit like a design firm. And also like an event. Like, it's crazy when I do pitches and stuff and the amount of things that I can add on top more than just like, we can give you a social media post. I'm like, we can activate on so many levels. And then finding those collaborators is always fun. And, I just did something like 2 days ago with a cycling company. And I'm like, let's do it. Nothing can stop me. I love anything, being outside, tech, education, ways that we can bring new audiences to things is just what I live for pretty much.
Dude, I feel like there's so many angles to go in with you because even when you're talking about this first foray into this app that you created, also love it. I mean, I recreated uh the damn album cover for my graduation photo from grad school because that was me. I felt when I was out, but so I'm like I'm with you. I had to do all the parts manually when I did it, but but even when you're talking about that app, right? The integration of like, hey, this is the product, but these are the channels, and thinking about all of the different ways to kind of bring that to life. And you were talking about ways that you were bringing people into it, and like you're pushing and pulling audiences into it. It's just wild to think that's just like how the brain is functioning for that. So that's just nuts to start off on. So this runs deep for you.
Yeah.
I think current, but like in my mind, I'm like everyone has their North Star people, right? Or like who's setting examples for Terrence when you were doing that stuff? Like who are you looking up to? Either like in your circle or like top of the mountain. Like this is the person that is already thinking like this, and I want to think like that too.
Man, going back, like I had my friend Kasim, like we were doing music stuff together. We were always inspired by each other. I have my friend Nick, like I said, we're building the app. Like I've got so many friends that are in entrepreneurship and creatives that I feel like it's too many to name. I'm sorry, whoever hears this, like, don't yell at me, but like, I mean, like my friend Dev and his wife Jasmine, like they have a jewelry company down in Dallas, Texas. I've had professors, my professor from high school, Miss LeBaron, that's when I used to do animation. She always was one of those teachers that poured a lot into whatever kooky thing I was thinking about. She was like, yeah, do it. Like, there's nothing that can stop you. You know what I mean? Like, just make it. And another person I really have always looked up to was my old college professor, Professor Rashawn. And pretty much I think he was my web development teacher, and I think we did graphics. And he always was like, "Man, you're doing these things that like it's so crazy that how are you?" I did my senior thesis was like this. I was really into way back in the day, the Yeezus tour, like all the projections and lights and sounds and all this stuff. Like, and I was like, how can I do that? And I was like, well, who's the one that's doing it? And I remember it was a designer named Ez Devlin, and she was doing all, the projections and set design. And, in college, I wouldn't say I was a partier. I did like to have fun sometimes, but I was like, man, how can we like elevate the college mess hall concert experience? And, we went to go rent a projector and we built all these, stock image projections and stuff, and through, filters and Premiere and After Effects and all this stuff. And, we were projecting on walls like in Freedom Square. My friend would be performing. I was projecting on boxes. I wish I had the original video. It was like these boxes, and like I remember I was playing really early on, like Little Uzi Vert and Playboy Cardi, and like people thought I was crazy. And like, even on that side, like I remember hearing Post Malone's like White Iverson on SoundCloud when they had like 10,000 views. And I was like, this guy's going somewhere. Like, I remember those things and like seeing those opportunities. And like I mentioned, like my friend Jorge, I bounce ideas off of him all the time, design or musically. And like, it's just, you just make so many friends, and it's like, yo, you can draw real good. I can take pictures real well. Let's print a shirt and I'll take the pictures. Oh, you know how to do engineering and you know how to write a song. Okay, well, let's find a beat. You mix it and you write it. I'll record it. Let's do this. And my friends have always really pushed me to like, bro, this you've got so much moving, and they always try to keep me grounded, and they're like, yo, try this, try this. You're doing an event here, we'll all come. You're doing an event here, we'll all come. We'll send it out. Like they've always been super supportive for me and being that kind of guidance. But now it's kind of shifted that like everybody that's like watching is now my guidance, and I'm like, people are saying, what's next? What you're going to do? And I'm hoping that unknown person is kind of being my North Star because it's like, I want to bring them into this ecosystem that I'm slowly curating, but also developing, but also innovating, but also allowing it to slow cook. I don't want to do too much. I don't want to do too little. I don't want to do the wrong thing, but I want to keep doing the right thing. And what that looks like, it could change daily. It could change in a week, but I feel like it's going somewhere. So that's the plan.
Totally. Well, it's so integrated to like, it's the company you keep, right? And being surrounded by so many creatives really does enable you kind of it kind of reminds me of like some people go to business school because like they meet their founders or their co-founders there, where like they bring their skill sets and stuff. The crowd I'd rather run within is the folks who are like have different creative skills, and then we can like build something from a visual representation or a multimedia thing. But it's cool. So setting the stage for D17, right? You mentioned just before that this is really an extension of your personality and your life. It blending sportswear and lifestyle is influenced by sports and intersecting sports for sure. And collaboration is a big element of that. So I saw first shirts, at least on like the D17 account, the first drop I started with. I went back. I went way back. Also 2017. So you've been in the game for a bit. So I imagine, right, like being able to distill the idea down to what we see takes time, right? Like you were probably working on stuff before there was a name. You're probably working on stuff before the account existed.
I used to
So
be not to cut you off, I used to be the Towson t-shirt guy. That was like my thing. Like I used to design all the shirts for like, you get the free t-shirt at like, oh, it's a, career fair week. It's a, dorm and resident life day. I designed maybe like 15 every week. I was getting requests from around the school. Oh, can you design this for us? Can you, it's housing and residence week. It's move-in weekend. Can you make a shirt? I was like the guy. I was like, ooh, let's make some crazy stuff for this shirt. And that's like kind of how it started. And that was like 2012. Like that was like right when I came out of high school. I just was like, I've been making stuff since birth. I was telling a friend of mine, like I found a home video I made with my sister with my dog, like ripping up a teddy bear. And I like put intros and stuff, and it was to Soldier Boys. I've got some bathing apes, and I like made it in Microsoft Movie Maker and everything. So like taking stuff from here and tangible has like always been my like it's like innate to me almost, not to sound like this philosopher, but I've always been the type of person that like it's nothing that I can't do if I just don't apply myself. So that's from the sports or sneakers. I've been collecting sneakers since also birth. My grandmother said, no woman wants to date a man with bad shoes. So every shoe I own is cleaned and put together. And like, I don't know why she would say that, but I've been camping out of Foot Lockers and Finish Lines. I've been with my buddy trying to get on, Foot Locker, trying to get a pair of Bread 11 so I can wear them to the basketball game later that evening. Like, been playing sports since forever. I ran track, played golf for 4 years. I played lacrosse. I played basketball. I played as an adult. I played kickball, won an adult rec soccer championship. Like, I was like, I want to make soccer jerseys, but I'm not going to do it if I can't play. I said, put me at that false nine. I'm gonna get something off it. So like, you know, it's just how it's always been, and that's how I got to the running stuff. I said I ran track in high school. I was a sprinter, but I wasn't a distance guy. And I was like, well, if I'm gonna put my face down and get into this running side, I'm gonna get out there. You know what I mean? I'm gonna train. I'm gonna bring my friends with me. All my friends run now. We had the run club and everything. It's like I'm very much the type that whatever I'm interested in, I like to dive into it, whether it's whatever topic or product or whatever. Golfing, I made golf stuff one time. I go play nine with anybody. You know, if I make cycling stuff, I might do an Ironman. You know what I'm saying? Like I love being that founder or whatever that, like I said, I never played soccer a day in my life, but I was like, I'm not going to make soccer jerseys for the brand. And I didn't never played. So I went and won a championship with my friends. So like I got the pictures with the trophies. So, I was like, let's make it happen. And it's just how it is. Nothing, like I said, nothing stops me. So I guess I also whatever. And as long as it lines up, then let's get to work.
Yeah, well, I love it. The clash of the personal experience with what you create and what we get to see and experience from a design perspective, from an event perspective, just so many things that captured my attention in all of this. And it's cool because you get to speak authentically to the people in that space when you're like, no, I'm not there too, right? Like
Mhm.
it's a whole other thing when I mean, this is not a knock on anyone, but I was recently in New York. It was the day of the Emilion Dor FootJoy collab drop.
Mm.
So I was in the neighborhood. I wanted to go anyways. Coincidentally, it was the day of the drop. And right, this shop is merchandised with the new collection from golf shoes to gloves to divot tools to the apparel, right? The whole nine was out there. And the way that I'm seeing, like, I don't know, there's something you could say about when ALD produces something, it is like an amorphous character that creates this collaboration. And as a result, it can be co-opted or adopted by a really wide audience, which is cool. It's cool for growth, right? Because then you might get people who learn about FootJoy for the first time, or learn about New Balance and like their running apparel or, something like that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it removes the element of being like core, embedded, and authentic in the space where like kids are buying golf gloves, they're probably going to wear like Michael Jackson with just like one on or a grip, you know what I mean? Where it's different. Whereas your approach is like, I'm going to play soccer. I'm going to like know where I sit in the space and like I'm going to produce some stuff that I would want in that space. Same thing with golf, same thing with running and all that stuff. And it's a really powerful position to be in as a founder and a creative like yourself to be like, it's my idea from my experience, and you can also join me, kind of thing.
Yeah, it's how it always goes. And even like you said, when you went back like all the way to like my first real drop, I think the biggest one for us, it was like the Power Rangers, like colorway inspired one. And, that was all my friends. That was not, it didn't go the way exactly the way I wanted it to, because the reason why I did it, because I was like, with the brand, I love color. There's so many colors that exist. I love black shirts, but like it's so many things. I've always loved the Power Rangers. I've always loved like their sense of like unity. And then if you go back and watch like the old episodes, they had some crazy fits on like, back in the day, they had like with the tanks, and like they looked great, like aesthetically as a group, but they always, every episode they wore something different that corresponded with the color. You know what I mean? So I was like, that's so cool from a stylistic side. And then like I said, I love the colorways, and I love how when people assume, red, black, yellow, pink, and blue, it's like, oh, it's Power Rangers and stuff. And when we did it, it was the back graphic. I'll talk about it now. So the back graphic was inspired by the Migos Culture album. That's why I had that same kind of bend. And then I was trying to figure out a way, like, I think that's where the phrase "the art drives culture" was the ADC campaign. And then, we were like, I was obsessed with the song T-shirt from that album. So I was like, let's make a T-shirt, the art drives the culture stuff, me trying to be cool and everything. But then that led on to everything that was going on with like Black Lives Matter and stuff. And that evolved into the Black art drives culture, which I hand drew like a graffiti artist, the logos, everything, the back led into that. And then ADC led into D17 Athletics, which is our now long-standing um, tagline, which is Athletics Design Community, which is a homage to Art Drives Culture, which was the ADC. So like came from, so that's the first time. If people would never recognize that, like that's where it came from so it pretty much was the breakdown of D17 Athletics. Obviously the design part, because I love finding solutions, a- and then community. But like, I love the word, but sometimes I kind of hate it now. But
Let's dig into that. Let's dig into that because I think it's like a really powerful perspective because I do think maybe not the definition, but the application has changed over time, right? It's evolved over time. And but with that being said, like what's your experience with that evolution? And like how does that influence like your perspective on the use of the word? Because I'll also agree with you, man. I think like community is a hot button word that is misused by a lot of brands and a lot of like spaces as a marketing term in the way that people used to say like storytelling is another thing that's like over indexed, right? Everyone says that. So
what's the whole
I'm with you.
of marketing? Like,
I'm with you.
you know,
But yeah, tell me about the intersection that you've seen with like community and brand and how it's all evolved over time.
I will say after our conversation, it gave me an immaculate change on how to really utilize the word. So shout out to you for that, because I won't spill our convo, but being able to kind of like see how your process was thinking, I was like, this is exactly where I'm going with the same way. And like, I do love the word community because that's what I grew up on. Where I'm from, like in Maryland, I I was taught like in high school, like that freshman orientation, you're like in the 8th grade and stuff, and it's a bunch of kids, whatever. And I remember our principal, Mr. Easton, came in, shout out to him too. He was like, you see all these people in this auditorium? You're gonna be with these people for the rest of your life. You're gonna go to weddings together, you're gonna go to baby showers together, you're gonna graduate together, you're going to do dumb stuff together, but these are the people you're going to be with forever. And that all my friends are getting married now. We played sports together. We've done business together. My one friend, he just had his son's birthday. Like, these are the people I grew up in that was my mindset. And even when I played sports, and that's with like D17, the 17 was my number when I played sports, is like a homage to building that, because it always was being able to be like, yeah, there's this community, you hear all the time. It's a community, there's a community, community. But like, there's two sides. Like, a community can be, people that go out and clean the trails and stuff at the local park. A community could also be like a bunch of idiots that like, they like breaking windows every, 15 days. Like, yeah, we're the window breaking gang. Technically that's a community. And like, not like shitting on it, excuse me, my cursing, but like, it's like, yeah, like, I'm not trying to knock anybody else, but I feel like, especially with us, we take so much time to develop each piece of everything, that it truly is not just saying we're all like-minded, but it's really just, how can I influence the people that are in my day to day and the people that are in their day to day? It starts to build that web. And then it's also like, if I'm going to produce something for profit, I need to find a way to circumvent it back. So like, when I started the run club, I sponsored like 15 races in Maryland. I literally, every race, I was like, I don't care what it is. Like, I'll sponsor it. I'll help pay for bibs. I'll help, pay for a water station. I'll help pay for this. Cause I was like, I don't want to start making running stuff if I'm not giving back to the running community because they were here long before I got here. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, even with the soccer stuff, I was like, I want to make, it's cool when brands make kits and stuff. So I was like, well, how can we help people that are actually playing soccer? And that's how we did our sponsorship with Howard County Recreation and Parks, which was to help lower the cost of summer camp for kids to stay in sports. So we were like, let's do that. And then, I think I sponsored 4 teams, 4 EPSL teams, which are like, they're trying to get into relegation promotion and like the American soccer system. So the community to me is always like, these are people that like, when they see the insignia and when they see that letter and 2 numbers, they're like, wow, that stands for something. And we kind of feel the same way. We see where it's popping up and what's going on, and it's positive. And as well, like I said, it influences, like, I don't know what somebody is and they come to Run Club. They may have never been to Run Club, or they buy the t-shirt and they're like, man, I'm about to start working out. I bought your shirt. I want to start going to the gym now. I'm like, okay, well, if you want to go to the gym, cool. If you want to come to Run Club, boom, we have this. Boom, we have a hydration partner. Boom, we have a retail partner. Boom, we have a footwear partner. So when you come into the ecosystem, it's not like you're lost. This is the community that I built. So now you step in with the shirt, here's the events that are going on, you're properly equipped. When you're doing these events, you probably can meet people of, whatever you're looking for, and then kind of tying it all into one like ecosystem. So when it's like, oh, you built a community, it's like, yeah, like you mentioned about the ALD FootJoy, you might get a bunch of people that love the product, boom, it'll sell out. But like, there's a guy that's been wearing FootJoy since the 80s. You know what I mean? What about them? What are we doing for golfers of color? What are we doing for female golfers? What are we doing for, it could have been cool to activate it like the LPGA. Boom, you've got the name. Why don't you take the attention to somewhere that it doesn't have it? Not, and like, I love ALD and I love FootJoy, but it's like, there's so many other pieces that can kind of go into it. Or like, let's do it with the, I don't know, something golfers of New York or something. Let's do it there. And then like, okay, we can activate there and activate here. That's a whole community. They've been doing it forever. Cause when you see somebody that, we all see it when we go running or racing and you see somebody that has something, it's like, why are you wearing that? But that's the community of people. That's the community of people, and then it's like, how do we tie it back to the person that wants to be in it, but it's inclusive. And I don't want to ramble because I will go on for hours. Like, I don't want, it has to feel inclusive, but also has to feel open, and inclusivity is not just like everyone's welcome, because there's too many people, but it has to be like, it can't feel like you have to look like us to be like us. It has to feel more open and inviting and, not so opportunistic, I guess you could say. But I could go on forever, and it's my damn brand slow.
Oh, I deep no, in like no, yeah, we're both like the slanger, but we have aren't quite interested.
So, because I wish I could get that. I wish I had people lined up for stuff, because I feel like it is making an impact, like you said, for growth and
Right.
expansion. And people might not know about FootJoy, but then there's always that trade-off person that like, they love the classic things, and then they also love, there's people that love new things, there's people that are in the middle. It's like, what's the gauge that we're going on? If you see somebody with a pair of reimagined Chicago ones, are they really a sneakerhead? You never know. That could be their first sneaker. You never know. It could be a person that never got a Chicago one since '84, and now they finally got it. It's like,
Yeah.
these stigmas and things, it's ever changing. And I'll keep it at this. I'm curious to what it will look like when the buzzword is no longer buzzy, because then it will go somewhere else. Because, like you said, storytelling, we storytell. I'm like, well, that's the point, that's the whole, we want to tell stories, but like, it's not going to be like my that's like saying, I don't know. It's such an interesting topic because like you have to do it, but you don't want to be the guy that runs around saying, I love storytelling. Well, tell the
Yeah.
damn story. Like, let the story do the story. Don't allow it to, you know, now you got to produce. And if it's not good, then, you're just a bad storyteller. And then everybody's going to, yeah, that's the guy. He tells bad stories. Stuff like that. So,
Sometimes I get on myself because I'm like, I definitely, I think a critique that I have sometimes, which I also fall into, is like dissecting phrases and words and like splitting hairs for the sake of it. So I'm like, and then I'm like, oh, why do people have to do that? Then I'm doing that. At certain points, I think like community in the way that it's used in a very like broad sense, some people refer to it as like activation, right? And like activation could be, there's kind of two categories of activation in my mind. There's like hype drivers and then there's community drivers within activation itself, where like hype drivers is like the FOMO, you had to be there. This is the cool moment with the great assets. This is a thing, like a place that you want to be. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's a place where you feel like you belong. And that's the difference where I'm like, well, community drivers to me, as a difference for activation, is more invested in like, there's going to be a range of people that come to this event who are not invited necessarily, right? They're coming off the street, or maybe the intention is to invite people with like wildly different backgrounds under some kind of like common ground, shared language. And the goal of that experience, potentially differently, is to drive commonality between different opinions. And that's where like people can then say like, okay, I get it. And then they can see somebody who's like in the orbit of them with differences in a shared space and shared activity and be like, well, we do the same thing. And it's not necessarily, it's a hype driver is like, wow, this brand did this cool thing. Whereas like community drivers to me is like, oh, I can see how I fit here as a different. I don't know. So it's something that like my definition will, in my opinions, will definitely change week to week, month to month, while there's more like, room and space for people to talk about it. But it is something like captures my attention as well. And it is really like, it makes me think, right, about all of these moments. Yeah. When collaboration and D17 are like in lockstep, and it's like a part of what the core of this business is, and this like creative endeavor is, that community, there is definitely a through line to all of us, Nick, regardless of what sport it's around, right? Like when you're showing up and you're doing stuff for like district rain, or you're doing something in golf, or you're doing something in running.
this is a deep cut pull.
I saw the dirt. Wait, when you're doing all of those different things, like the execution of this may look different over time, not because of resources, but because the definition is different in a sense, right? Of like what community activation is and what the expectations are. And I was talking to somebody recently, like, it's cool to think about when I was at Tracksmith early days. The first time we did the Twilight 5000, we did popsicle sticks for timing and like hand timed it. And we did it on the river and it was cool. We showed up with a cooler, like with a stopwatch and popsicle sticks. If that brand showed up in that way right now, people would be like, what am I doing? Right. So like the goalpost is always moving in terms of that stuff where like, you could argue that something at super grassroots is something that feels more authentic or more inviting, but the expectation of production is also a burden in the realm of like community activation as well. So it's a complex soup to say the least. And I'm sure you know that too.
Yeah, it's always because like, not saying that the meter always slides, but it's always just like something changes. And I'll say this now, if you go back when I was on Complex Magazine, right, in 2021, I was on a show. It was called The Mailroom, and I sent the shout Rax. That's my guy. I sent him a whole bunch of stuff, and he pulled the running stuff off. And he had the hat. There's a video of him. He's like, "I'm going jogging." He had the hat on, and I lost points in the show because he said, I think it was like adaptive or range or something, adaptability. And I lost points because he said, not a lot of people run. So I don't know if a lot of people will like that. That was 4 years ago. You know what I'm saying? If I did that today, I'd look like a god. They'd be like, oh my goodness, a running brand is on Complex. Like, and it's always crazy because like you said, it's always something slides and then it's always, are you inside like the range or are you like outside it? Because, and not to like say, my credit is due where it needs to be, but like when I first started the run club, I people laughed at me. They were like, uh, who wants to do that? I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. And they're everywhere and I love it. But then it's also like, it's always interesting, like how it flows because even, I've seen it on Instagram and it's like people, they saying the brands are like the communities of the run clubs. And then now the brands are like buying the run clubs. And then it's like, that would have been a foreign concept 4 years ago. You would have thought that like people were buying up, if pickleball kept going, people would have buying up pickleball brands or like, back to ALD, they do like I think it's like Sunday or Saturday washed club. They like play basketball and stuff, which is super cool. I'm like, what is that going to look like? And then from a brand standpoint, it's like, well, if you're not seeing X amount of points in this category, do you switch to this one? I know like some of our, industry favorites. I know at one point Nike dominated footwear. Everybody was wearing LeBrons, Jordans, Kobe stuff. Now it's like, I remember I saw a video. It was Jaden Daniels on the Washington Commanders. He wore a pair of Kobe's going to training camp, and people are like, "Kobe's not on the court? You're crazy!" And I was like, if this was 10 years ago, they would have been like, "Oh my gosh, he's got Year of the Snake, Kobe's on. That's so cool." Now it's like, if he doesn't have on a pair of Asics Kayano 14s or something, you're like, "Oh, that's crazy." So being able to like find that middle ground is where I think I've landed. I think I'm now at the point that I don't care anymore. Like, yeah, I want my run club to last until I'm dead. You know what I mean? Like, I've the running has been around for forever. And whatever, like you said, that different verticals that stuff goes into, it feels natural. And like I'm even at the point to where I'm out there too. But it's also like, how can we develop these long lasting, like you said, either if it's community driven or hype driven. I think there's a way that we found to kind of fix both. But then it's also, like you had mentioned, how do you tackle both sides? Because if you go too far one side, then you're just, oh, you're hype brand. There's no substance, just hype. If you go the other side, you got a lot of substance, but it's not cool. So it's like, how do you find that middle ground without compromising each side? Because I know that, especially internally, like I said, I've been in those rooms. You could blow the budget on the hype to sell the product, or you could do it on sustaining. You might spend a little more, but the back end's going to be a lot longer. So it's like, it's always things, any industry professionals, that are trying to like get in the marketing stuff. What does that look like? And then pretty much if you're a brand owner, it's like, which side do you want to take? You can mesh both and try something new, or, pick one and commit and just make the best out of it. And if you got to switch, it's okay. But if you got to stay in one lane, then, go all out. At least that's how I feel about it. But
Yeah. Are there any brands that you think are hitting both sides well right now in the community and like activating hype in the moment?
there's a guy I just saw on LinkedIn. I don't know his name. Sorry if I don't know your name. It's a golf thing called Swang. They've been doing some really cool stuff. Like I've seen them before. Like they activated like Rolling Loud. They activated like I love golf, so I'm like, this is really cool. What they've been doing. The brand you featured in your Substack, Minted New York, like I've seen Marcus's journey, and we're kind of like the same because I think he's from Virginia. He played lacrosse, stuff like that. He was doing menswear and then wanted to get into running. And then like, I always find it so interesting. I just saw a interview that he did, and he was like, I'm just a guy that's just telling my story, and people, build onto it. He tells absolutely beautiful, narratives on long form on YouTube and X. And he's like, there's so many things and places and stuff that we're trying that just sounds really cool. And I think he just started doing supplements. So then it's like, I think somebody said, well, you were menswear. Now you're doing running. Now you're doing supplements. And I'm like, why can't he do all three? Why do we have to box it in that he has to do one? You know what I mean? So, and I loved what they did with Saucony, on the performance side and on the lifestyle side. I'm like, damn, Marcus, like, send me whoever's number. It thought I could do the same thing. And
You Jason's number.
yeah, like I'd be like, hey, look, man, let's do this thing. I know it's gonna take like 18 months, but like let's do it. And I will say as well, not that it's a whatever, but Arc'teryx has been really good. With really, they stick to what they know. And we talk about it with like our ambassador stuff, like, these are our core sports, but how can we build around that experience so it's not just like outdoor and hiking, but it's like, hey, the Gore-Tex works for that, lady that's just walking her dog in the city, and it also works for that runner that's preparing for an ultra, but also works for that person that's climbing the Alps, but also works for, that streetwear kid that just wants to, find a vintage beta jacket on Depop. They know exactly what they're sticking into. And then ways, because I've seen them doing activations with like groups in New York. I forgot their name, and they're like, whoa, this is huge. And it feels like this is what it's supposed to look like. It's hard to explain it, but sometimes you see something and you're like, it feels right. It's like PB&J or like Wayne Frosty and it doesn't make sense, but it just does. I love when stuff comes together like that. So
Implement.
yeah, I would think those three are pretty, they stick really to it.
I was getting an education from a friend of mine, Sibshend Eden, and he was recently an interim director of community at Arc'teryx, and he was teaching me about the roots of the brand in climbing, and how there were these efforts to kind of ramp that climbing community back up from a brand values perspective, but kind of putting a twist on it and doing events like in New York and like urban centers, instead of, someone associating climbing with like hammering pitons into like the south wall of whatever mountain facing Yosemite, right? So like, I think that was super cool to see, kind of like a remix on it in a way, but still remaining core. But I also, since I don't know the climbing space well, I'm like, man, that seems so challenging to bring people into that sport. I'm sure, right, the folks who are really core to it, who are top brass in that space, or even just, manager level, associate level folks at Arc'teryx who know climbing well, are like, no, this is exactly how you build the bridge in. And like, that's why those people are doing a great job. So
Yeah,
it's really cool.
it's always crazy to see it. And it's always interesting because there's people that they're willing to accept both sides, and being able to see what that synergy looks like. Like even like I found like an old Arc'teryx like Palace jacket, and I was like, this is tough. It's like it's like, okay, I can still be, weatherproof, but still kind of have that, hype to it. But then it's like how they activated around it was crazy, because it was like, let's go skateboarding in the rain. Let's go, do this, or let's do that. And it's like, okay, I could see where that synergy is coming from. And like I said, it doesn't feel off. It just feels like it's on point. It's a little bit against the grain, but that's okay, because we know that everything is very much like copycat. Because then once you start seeing it like little nuances in other places, it's like, okay, it worked. So But then by the time you're on it, like me, when I see something that like I did, not saying anybody's copied me, but like I'm off it. I'm like, all right, I'm on the next thing now. So what's new?
Yeah. One of the recent things that Arc did, like in the last year, that I was like, whoa, this is nuts, is the Walk Gently collection. That was crazy from a design perspective. I'm going to use the word storytelling perspective. Apologies in advance, but he, the way that they utilized visual language ties back to like the history of the designs, the utility of them as well, and then also being able to like, I mean, shooting a fish scale jacket with someone actively net fishing is like, it's so good. And they don't even need words on the page. I mean, I'm interested. I see like the design elements of and the iconography they're using, and I want to go deeper to find out like why is that placed there. But my first interaction with it was like I saw this photo. It was like somebody on a lake shore, really dark, moody photo, and the only thing I can see is like these reflected elements, and it just invites me in. I'm like, something's going on here, and that to me is super cool. So you're bringing people in. Like I approached it from a design and art perspective, and then I'm learning more about it because I want to be a part of it, and that's that was so sick. But a question I have for you that's like in the space of run clubs, right? To kind of return to that as well, right? You did uh, a recent collab with other run club at Love Groove Festival, right? And this is a lot of folks were in the room. It was you, it was Runners Runs, it was like Lowe's crew, it was the Believe Run Club, Riot Squad, all of these groups together. What was it like to be around so many other crews? Like, was it easy to kind of just like slot in and know what everyone was providing, or was there a little bit more to like figure out?
I will say, in terms of the cities, I love the Baltimore running scene. The Baltimore running scene, let me say it correctly. I, I we all have our own lanes, which is awesome. We all, even when I remember when we did that, it was cool because I know the guy that ran the festival at Love Groove. He's a collaborator of mine, which I knew from my homie that rapped. He produced a couple songs for him, and he was like, "Yo, I got this festival. We're trying to do this wellness activation. Like, would you like to come out and bring your club?" I think just me went because it was early in the morning, and I was like, "I'm just gonna go." And being able to kind of see, yes, we all have different, values and ways and days that we run our clubs, but we all represent the same entity, which is Baltimore City. And being able to show like this is, what we do. And we didn't run like by the harbor. We was out there. So it was like being able to see it, even the people that watched us go by, they're like, yeah, they cheering us on and stuff, thinking we running a race. We really was not. And being able to, collaborate. You're like, yo, oh, y'all doing this? Oh, okay. My club will come hang with y'all. Oh, y'all are doing this. Oh, we all do stuff with Charm City Run. Oh, we'll all go together. There's this, ultra event. Oh, let's all go. Let's all represent the city correctly. And, I'm very close with a lot of the run leaders as well. Like we did some additional stuff with Runners Run and Canton Run Club with Under Armour last year for one of Charm City Run's signature races. And that day was like the funnest. I mean, yeah, we got to see the Under Armour HQ before they moved and stuff, and that was cool. But like, it didn't feel like, okay, there's this group, and this group. We're all just kind of like eyeballing each other or something. It was like, let's get to work. And it was fun. Like we were booking it. Like it was great. Like we were, racing against each other between the different segments. And like we were running through the harbor and we saw Believe in the Run Club there. And we're like, hey, yo, we're going this way. They're like, oh, we're going that way too. It's just like everybody's just like going all these different places. And then, Believe in the Run, is an immaculate, media company out here. They're always out there. And then like, They just did a interview with Bima Williams with like the collaborations and the running community, and we see them out there, and we're just like, oh, it's Global Running Day, y'all coming out? Oh yeah, we gonna be there. It's always been such a camaraderie, and because we all have the Baltimore Running Festival in the fall, you see the flags and the tents and stuff, and we all just come together as a true representation of the city. That it's like, this is what we can do as a unified group. Yes, there's other things that always is like smaller, and I don't want to release it yet, but I am working on a project with all the groups. And I think we're going to shut the city down. It might be like 400 of us out there running. Like, it might look like a race. I'm hoping, in the fall, but the fact that I can just go on my phone and just, what's up, Riot? What are y'all doing? Y'all having your 5-year anniversary? Bet. There's another group in Towson called Block Blazers. They've been growing crazy. And I'm like, hey, let me come to y'all's 1-year anniversary. Is what I'm doing. Oh, we'll come to your thing with the Wizards. We'll come here. I've always seen that support and super grateful for it. And all that started from the initial me with my friend that rapped, and then he did some songs, and then John Tyler, who owns the festival, he reached out, and I was like, let's do it together. And we just made it happen. And we went to go to the festival, they had Smart Water, and I met the girl at Smart Water, and I was like, yo, you trying to sponsor a club in Columbia? So we trying to get the Smart Water thing. Like, it's just, you just ask, you get whatever you want. And then it's just being able to feel that is great. And having that support, like from Charm City Run, from the other groups, from like Under Armour and everything. And just, I love it, man. I love running in the city. It's the best thing ever to me.
Well, building on that, right? One thing I wanted to definitely talk to you about is the event you did with the Wizards. Because like, this reminds me of what you were saying before of like, hey, put 5 years ago, this doesn't happen. Because not to pray about you weren't doing big things, but like the Wizards might not be in a place to care about like the cross section of their fan base and running. So like it's really cool to see that they're in a place to say we want to activate that space, and then also trust somebody to do it instead of just being like, when people like over corporatize something where they're like, well, if we want to be in the space, so we'll do something, and maybe they'll pay a lot of money to host a 5K like around the stadium or something. That's like $120,000 investment. It's just like, you do realize that people would care more if you did do that potentially, right? So I think it's like a really cool convergence, but I'd love to hear how the conversation started, and then like, what the kind of shared goals were for y'all.
Yeah. So the conversation really started again, way back when I did my bootleg release of my Towson t-shirt at the homecoming.
That was a bootleg? That was cool, sure.
That wasn't real. Well, we're working on getting the license. They know we did all that stuff. I told them, they saw it, that don't sue me, Towson. We're trying to get the license. I had the lady's card right here. So when I did that, I actually met the VP of partnerships of Monumental Sports. She's an alumni of the school. And I was like, oh, okay. So I sent, I got her a shirt and everything. And, we continued the conversation. And couple, like, it had to be like 2 years later, they reached out to me on my website, like as a cold call, like just, fill out the contact form, like on your personal website. And I was like, what? I was just so confused because they reached out and they're like, yeah, we're trying to do this thing, with, fan engagement and stuff like that. I'll spill the sauce here. Who cares? It's just like you said, company A has a goal. Sometimes they have to bring in people, agency, outsource to reach said goal. So that's like where I come in. I'm like the connector. I'm able to be that kind of representative or ambassador to help them reach the goal. Their goal is to sell tickets. So they said, okay, well, we're trying to figure out what to do in order to, increase ticket sales. We're trying to reach this audience group, like 25 to 35, everyone's, the list came out. I forgot the magazine, but it's like, Arlington was like the number one healthiest city in the country. DC was like number 4, stuff like that. And I pretty much proposed to them. I said, hey, we should do this thing where it's like a community wellness event, but it will be a way that highlights everyone in DC. It wasn't just, yes, I was spearheading it, but I was like, let's try to bring representation from like all these different clubs in the city. So when someone comes out that's a novice, they can meet the, the founder of this group, the founder of this group, the founder of this group, and that stuff. And I was like, okay, so we did that, reached out, did the outreach and stuff. And then over time, I'm a big data guy when it comes to like my marketing strategy. So over time, a lot of people were getting feedback, social listening, stuff like that. A lot of people saying, well, I don't want to run, I want to walk it. So I said, well, I don't want to just say, oh, we're just going to have a walking portion for whoever. I'm trying to run. So, and I didn't want to just designate somebody and say, hey, you're going to lead the walking portion. So that's when we got in contact with Black Girl Walking Club in the DC chapter. And I reached out to them and I just said, hey, like, would you all be interested in joining in on this? Like, it's with the NBA. We'd love for you all to highlight like your group and being able to, lead the walking part because that's what you guys do. And he said, sure, send us all the information and everything. And we ended up trying to get a location. We had a couple that said no. We found Grounded in DC. It's in Southeast DC, right next to Anacostia Park. They're a women-owned cafe and plant shop. It was the end of Women's History Month. It also was, I said, I don't want to go to another cafe. I love going to the cafes, but I was like, let's kind of switch it up because, we were talking about mental health, the benefits of running, the benefits of being outside. Let's put it in a space that really can amplify that. And the space is immaculate. It's beautiful. It's filled with plants and it's a cafe and, they have seating areas and stuff like that. Very beautifully lit. We curated the sound in there as well, which was great. And then the last part we didn't get, but it took a little bit, the timing. We tried to bring in a vintage, clothing like reseller, to bring some like Wizards gear that people could wear to the game later on, like have them just set up like a pop-up. So it was like, cause I like DMV, it's a lot of vintage shops out here. And I was like, man, I would love to like go to the running event, do whatever, boom, boom, boom. There's somebody like selling like old, Wizards, Gilbert Arenas t-shirt or something, or like, the gold jersey and stuff like that. But we couldn't bring them in time, but I've kind of got it in the back of my head for like another time. And then obviously we went out and activated and came back, the actual running part, and then captured the content. Shout out to Austin for shooting it. And then now it's like, and like, I'll be honest, I wish we had a little bit more people, but again, we have the proof of concept of what it was like. We've seen other teams kind of do it, but like you said, sometimes there's a point where it gets too corporate and then it's like, well, we can tell you guys can do X, Y, and Z to piece this together, which I'm not against, but it worked out in a way that I remember I was telling people, I was like, man, I thought we'd get like 150 people, we may have had like 30, 35. And I remember they were saying, well, that was extremely dedicated 35 people that they were very much into it. We had a lot of people from out of state because we tapped into DC tourism. They're like, oh, we found it online. We were in town and we just decided to come by. And it was great to kind of see that. And I was like, oh my goodness, this is crazy. So then, the back end, you have to share all the results. Like, hey, we had a 75% email open rate. We grew by like 200 followers, stuff like that. So now when it comes to the second iteration, we have a roadmap, and they were more impressed with like, okay, this is what didn't work. This is what did work. And here's how we move forward. Because I want to make something for them. That's the goal. Like, I want to make something for them. Like, you come and you get this and you get that, for signing up. So now it kind of plays that long-standing relationship that we can build with the team. which then will translate to the players, which then can translate to the overall community, because, the Wizards, they have somebody that does grassroots outreach, and stuff like that. And you can play that connecting piece for them. You're kind of like, I always tell people, how can I make your job easier? That's what I tell them. I'm like, what can we do to get butts in seats and shirts sold? How can we do that? And that's how I've always kind of approached it. Um, and we got another one, but I can't say the team yet. So
Not yet, but it's cool because I think of when you're telling the chronology of this, and like, I appreciate you being so candid, sharing all of these things about it. It just reminds me of the importance of the like trust on both sides, and also preparedness, right? From your side as well, because a lot of times I feel like partnerships have a lot of one of those two things and maybe not a lot of the other, because like, hey, your goal is to have a long-term relationship. But if there's not trust on their side to say, hey, let's do more, we're interested in doing more than one of these, and trust to say, like, we know we're trying to capture the natives in the first version, the people that are the risk takers that want to be a part of something new, and then they can like evangelize going into the second time, and the people after they see that first execution say, you know what, that looked pretty cool. Like, I definitely should go, because they need a little bit more of a push. There's that trust in you to be able to produce on like a grand scale. There's the trust in them to say, like, no, we're invested as well. But then there's also the preparedness for you to say, and this is what we're going to do with it, which is super cool. So it does feel like there, it's definitely like both parties are bringing something to the table in that regard. But I can definitely see how that comes together to be successful. I'm excited for future iterations.
yeah, it was cool. Like I said, I had a blast, like being able to kind of see it. And then, like I said, I'm a data guy. So like, even looking back at the numbers, I was like, man, we got a lot to work with now, because I had a couple of events that I did before. So like, that was really like my first real big one. I don't know what divinely blessed that into my hands to get that as like my first big, um, like event thing. And like, it was me, my buddy, and like two of my old interns. We all did it together. Like, it really was like nitty gritty. I was up till 1, 2 in the morning looking up like free event listings in Washington, DC, just like they're just like submitting. And then even our partner, through the RSVP system, Sweat Pals, I met with their head of operations, Maggie, and she was really, kind, like, hey, like, how can we figure out how to best amplify this and use the platform correctly. And, we had that many X for the Wizards event. We did our second one and we almost doubled in numbers. So I'm like, because now we have the data to back it up, and the subscriber base, following base stuff to kind of do it. And again, like you had mentioned, it's cool when you say it, but I remember when I used to work events in my old position, if you get 100 people, you can slack off 25%. It's just not going to show up, because this is something that they don't know about. And, it was never done before. So it's hard to get people to say, oh, come do something that you don't know what it is. Is it a basketball event? Is it a running event? Is it a race? Is it, whatever? And now that we've kind of been able to etch those edges out, timing. I mean, we had to combat 4 events in the same day. Like, you don't never know what's going to happen. It was Cherry Blossom Festival. It was the first uh, great weather for the Cherry Blossom Festival in DC. That's huge. Hydrox, I think is what it's called.
Well, Hyra's,
High Rock
yeah,
was the same day at the same time. So we had to deal with that. The metro got backed up. I think they said it was like 70,000 people took the metro like in the first 3 hours of it opening. So it backed up traffic, people can't get to the location. And then there was another retailer doing almost the same event at the same time in the same place down the street. I was like, "Oh my gosh." I was just like, that is truly small brand mentality, because I was like, there is no way that I'm going to outclass these. I'm not going to say their name because I love them. I was like, there's no way. I was like, we could have did this together. I'm like, now you're fighting attention, and they say, I remember when I was first coming into marketing, they told me, the hardest thing to fight for is attention. It's so many things going on that how do you why do I want to go to mom and pop burger shop when I can just go to McDonald's? When I know the mom and pop might be better for me, but I can go get a meal deal for $5 and I know it'll tear me up for 48 hours. I love McDonald's too, but like it's always something against something. And then it's always like, well, once we had the follow up, it was like, okay, we had this, this open rate, this growth in followers, this much reach, this much engagement. We grew this, but here's what we were missing, because and honestly, sometimes when it comes to collabs and partnerships, it's always, like I said, it's company A and then company B. There's always a point where it either goes two ways. Company A outshadows company B. So then people get mad because they say, well, this doesn't feel right. You just took this and you just spanked the logo, because company A is bigger than company B. There's also a point where it goes like this way, where company B is doing a lot of the legwork and then company A is just there. And then they're saying, well, they just brought them in because, they'll shelve out 15 grand for the collab to just to do something, but it didn't really hit. So now when company B doesn't produce the way company A thought it was going to be, now company A has to explain why company B ain't the one. Let's be honest here. If it don't work, you're not saying you get booted, but you got to perform. Then there's some collabs that it goes like this, and it's like, company A found a way to increase themselves. Company B found a way to increase themselves. Now they're kind of moving in tandem together. And I think with us being company B, and because it was so low lift, we were able to be like, well, this is what didn't work. Company A, being the Wizards, they said, well, okay, but you had if then what will we change? And I was able to present, this is what I would have done better. They said, okay, that sounds a little bit, let's try it again. I don't know if I'll get a third time, but I'll take the two, and then going from there. And like I said, I want long-standing relationships with my brand personally. I love one-off activations, but I want stuff to last forever. Not forever, but like a long time, and beneficial to each other. And that's the same thing that I post a lot, like on LinkedIn. I'm like, oh, I love to work with a footwear company or something like that. Like, I want to be able to evolve in their ecosystem or my own ecosystem, and then building it from there. But that's, when you just got a team of 4 people and, we have an idea, but sometimes ideas, you got to cut it down so it's not so grandiose, because you're going to burn yourself out. But we got to the point where it was like, all right, now we know what to do. Let's do our next one. But we did it with Mahana Fresh in Maryland, and we like doubled the numbers. I'm like, all right, so what worked from last time? Okay, now we're going to take that. The next one, we'll double it again. Okay, now we know, let's think about location, time, whatever, boom, boom, boom. Okay. So now when I come back, boom, hey, I've got all this insight, data, subscribers, opted in subscribers, social following, XYZ. Now we can kind of see how it'll turn, and then going from there. And then, okay, I can bring in Mr. Fry's guy food truck, and he's cool with it. because he sees the numbers. Oh, I can bring in, I don't know, a nail tech. Fuck it. She could do wizard's nails for people, stuff like that. They see the numbers. So now it's like, okay, we can kind of give a better pitch deck and evolve from that. And then when it works, now company A goes, okay, y'all doing something. Let's try this. Okay, that's working. Let's try this. And then you can do whatever. And then you start seeing crazy stuff like, oh, D17 practice jerseys or something. It probably won't happen because like you'll kill me. But you never know. It could happen. But you just got to stay persistent. Like sometimes it's crazy, but it works though.
Yeah. Well, I know I'm taking mental notes of the advice and learnings that you're providing and almost to yourself to be like, hey, this is what I had to do along the way in order to like continuously present an enticing offering. And if you were to like give some advice to, in addition to the things that you've said, right? Like after you get that first data point and like making sure that you are consistently iterating, if somebody's approaching, let's say their first collaboration or partnership, what's some advice that you'd give them to make the most of that moment?
I would definitely say one, think about it. Like, does it align, it's up to the person. I always tell them it's up to them. Don't just like fire off a whole bunch of stuff. I feel like Bima. Don't just fire off a whole bunch of stuff, just being like, hey, let's collab, let's do this, let's do this, let's do this, let's do this, because you don't want to spread yourself too thin. But like, at least for like our industry, you have to be everywhere, but you can't be everywhere. Because if you're too much everywhere, then you're just the guy that's just like bumming all these companies and just like, okay, well, why is he gotta collab with a plastic cup company? And then he's gotta collab with a popcorn company. Then he's gonna collab with Marvel. Oh, that's dope. But he's gotta collab with like you don't want to keep using collabs to elevate the business. At some point, the whatever you have to stand on your own so that you obviously bring, that value to that offering. And then also like always try to look back and see, what will this look like? What does it look like 3 months from now? You know what I mean? Because I still talk about the Wizards thing, very candidly. I'm like, hey, this is what we did and whatever. And like for our next team that we're going to be working with, I told them, I was like, look, this is the numbers. I'll send you guys the whole spreadsheet report of what it looks like. And they're like, okay, well, this is what this is what this is. This is what this is. How is this going to line up and how does it work? And I'm able to explain it because you don't want to get yourself in something and then you're like, I think I bit off more than I can chew, or it doesn't feel right. Because I know there's some things that exist in our world that we're like, that don't make no sense. It's like, you clearly know that like, we know what it is, like we know how this became a thing, and you don't want to get that stigma because then you have to like change your whole marketing to get away from it or to embrace it. And then that can cost money, that can cost time, that can cost mental willpower. Because there's been times I've had, yes, people see the amount of stuff I post, but there's been a couple that I'm like, I don't know if this don't sound too good because it just doesn't. I can tell why I'm being approached, and it's like you have to learn to say no sometimes because there was one, I won't say the industry, but it was something that I'm not very fond of, and it was a product that I don't really endorse like that. And I was like, it could be cool for the weekend, but then what does that look like if I approach, we're doing an event tomorrow with a children's center. And I don't want to say, hey, I went and I did this. And then now they're saying, well, I heard about, you did this. And then now that kind of cuts that door. Or like, you don't want to jump into something. And it's like, well, you're now rubbing elbows the wrong way because we're all connected. We all know somebody at somewhere. It's some company. Like I knew people at when I was at Asics, I knew the people at Adidas, New Balance, you know, wherever. And then it's like, you know that we have to keep putting out great product, because then it makes everybody else look bad. Cause then it's like, who wants to work with another streetwear brand? They don't ship on time. They post, crazy stuff, then it's like, it makes all the streetwear brands look bad. And it's like, oh, they're not putting time into this. They're not putting time into this. Then it's going to be, why are we going to work with a streetwear company? Because, or lifestyle or whatever, they're not really doing anything. Or if it's like, oh, I mean, nobody wants to endorse the bad team, except I forgot. I think it was Burger King. They did something cool with the bad team in FIFA. But like, how do you play that role without stepping on toes?
Yeah.
Because at some point you have to step on toes in a good way. And then if you find that synergy, it's like, all right, cool, we can go with it. And then sometimes you might not hear back. Just because you don't hear back on a pitch does not mean it's like the end of the world. People get busy, it's okay to bother them a little bit, but like sometimes they get busy, or they move companies, or they go here, but you never know. You could reach out to somebody at X company, they could move somewhere else, and they could say, hey, I was working at Atmos, something happened. Now I'm over at, I don't know, Hydration World. And then, you've rubbed the right elbows, and it's like, okay, well, now we can work with y'all because of the relationship I built here, which then, if that works for me, then cool, we can work together. If not, then, appreciate the consideration. I'm happy to find someone else you can work with, but I don't try to take it if I get a no. I'm not like, F this company, they suck. You can't say that, because you never know what could develop from it, and what could build even bigger in that.
No, I love it. When you were talking about was working with like multiple brands and stuff and who you work with, it I think it mirrors in some sense, the kind of like an influencer space where there are different thresholds for different audiences of different people. And some people, I was just listening to the Acquired podcast, and like they talk about all of like these business forums, and they did one on the IPL, the cricket league in India.
Yeah.
And they were talking about how this one, like the biggest cricket star, who was like 50 million followers or whatever, has just sponsored posts as like the last 2 months of things, but is getting good engagement. And they're like, well, I guess the audience tolerance for that is different. So in the same way with brands, right? Some brands might be known. I'm going to bring up ALD again, right? Like they're able to do collaborations regularly. There are long-standing ones, but it still retains cool factor, and the opportunity for them to iterate is still there. But when we think of like maybe a step too far, I think kind of like Supreme and what happened when they were doing like 7 collaborations per collection with like Oreos, and like
The people hate it. They said it's too much.
right, exact. It is kind of like sometimes you don't know until you hit it, but at the same time, like, cautionary tale, like you were saying, like, hey man, look back at what this will look like. Not to say look at the feed like it's gonna be, 3 months ago, but even just reflecting on the timeline of the business and of like what you're trying to build. Do you want to be known for like the agency that's just pumping collaborations out as long as they're quality, or do you want to do things that are different than that and just kind of finding the North Star? I think that's great.
Yeah. As it always, when you approach the next one, I always try to like, I use, things that we've done before. Like we did stuff with the minor league, NBA, NWSL, Howard County Recreation Park, stuff like that, because that, we're building technically like our own brand portfolio. Not saying that's going to help. Not saying if someone's going to look at it and be like, man, we got to work with them, because you still have to find a way to find that like level playing field. But then it's also like, how does that look when you look back and you're like, dang, okay, so we did all this stuff with all these organizations or teams or whatever your industry is, how does that look back? Because eventually, like you said, there's still going to be ties at some point. Like there's still some people that look at like old, like people don't even talk about the Kobe Adidas, but there is somebody that remembers like, oh, remember when it started, he had to get with Adidas to get to Nike. You know what I mean? Like what he did there led to this. What happened with like Fortnite? Fortnite was garbage, but once they started bringing in like all the IP and stuff, it became to what it is, because then it opened up an avenue. Because remember, like Drake and Travis Scott were on Mr. Beast and all of them, and Ninja were all playing. So now it's kind of like, okay, getting that, leads to this. And then you kind of take that and build off it. Obviously, there's ways that like we mentioned, you can get longer relationships with like the companies and stuff. Cause then you can be like, okay, if I'm Travis Scott and now, they put the shoes in the game in Fortnite, he could have a whole Fortnite tournament with Nike. And then like, oh, you can only get this Fortnite colorway of like the Cactus Jack shoes in the game, cause that started with him playing with Drake and Ninja, which then led to this. People don't even remember Travis Scott was with Reebok way back in the day. Like he was with Reebok way back when he was still doing like upper echelon,
Right.
like people don't, I mean, yeah, but we had to do that to get to this. And like, even with my, collabs and partnerships I've done, we've kind of tailed it back a little bit now, but like, I'm thinking like long standing, and I'm like, okay, when it's time to implement, like I mentioned before, we have this partner, this partner, this partner, this partner, in the communities that we want to activate in, or the places that we want to activate in. Here's how we can tailor it. And then when people see it, they're like, oh, that makes sense. I could have went and got a licensing agreement with any other college, but I chose to start with my alma mater first. We're a mid-major, we're not getting the Fanatics deal. I say, well, I know how to design and print stuff. I'll do it myself, and then figure out who the correct person is to speak to make it official. And then we've got the one, so I'm hoping that will evolve into 2, 3 collection, university store takeover or something, in a way that kind of keeps building. And then it's like, okay, that's, one segment of the community, like obviously education and stuff. Then I can use myself. I'm like, hey, we can do, a symposium or something. I'll come speak and stuff like that, which is cool because then I'm influencing the kids and stuff. And then, what if we want to take it and we go to like one of the local retailer in the area? Okay, let's take it there. Oh, we've already worked with this school. How about we come to you guys? We bring you guys the product. Let's just activate in your store to get people in the store. So then it's like, okay, it's all seamlessly coming together. Now I've made my relationship with this store over here. Yo, I got a lifestyle release that's coming out in December. Can I just pop up with y'all? Oh, sure. We remember what you did with them. You can come do it here. So now I have that. It's like I have it in like my Rolodex, like my back pocket. I'm like, okay, well, I can go here. I can go here. I can go here. But it all seems to work in the same ecosystem. So, it's always timing. People have done bad deals. We've seen all the time. They've done stuff they don't like. You don't want to, like you said with Supreme, you don't want to be super blown in on the collabs, but also when it works, you kind of have to keep moving the machine, because at the end of the day, like we still have to operate, and whether it's big business or small business, because we want to keep lights on, rent needs to be paid, stuff like that. And then going from there. But there's so many like great things that are happening, because I don't have the book slash there right there. It's like at one point collabs were crazy. Now it's happening all the time. And then it's also like, we know ones that stick out, ones that kind of don't. But that's no disrespect to the ones that didn't, because someone had to see that to make this. And that's this. It's cool when you hit it out the park the first time, but that second time, what's it going to look like? What's it going to be like? How are people going to feel about it? Because they know what happened the first time. Like the AE ones, I see it all the time. People are like, some people like the AE2, some people don't like the AE2 because the AE1 was so crazy. Now it's like, I'm pretty sure if Anthony Edwards wanted to, he could just go to anywhere, you know. Novak Djokovic went to 361. So he could have went with Nike, but like, it's always something. There's so many different ways to spin the block and, do the Rubik's Cube that works for you. You could go independent, you could do whatever, but as long as it aligns and honestly, as long as it's positive, I say just go for it. Just fire it off, just see what happens. You never know. And then you keep going and going and going and going, and you build up this, all these collabs, and here you are. I like the Orioles. I'll just hit them up. Let's do something. Nothing stops me. That's just me personally, but I just do this and just see what happens. If you want to do it, cool. If you don't feel like that's your route, it's not a knock. Because collabs, they look different. Partnerships, they look different. Whether it's product, activation, seeding. I mean, creators, influencers. It's all whatever you build it as, because there's no playbook to it. But you can learn a lot from what happened before to find out what works, and then have fun. I mean,
I know we're just continuously like stacking bricks. It's like, right, the theme that I kind of pull down from this, like everything impact the next step. And like I could talk to you all day about that. It's really sad. I gotta let you go at some point. But this has been super cool. I really appreciate your perspective, Terrence. Like it's cool because I know there are gonna be some people who listen and engage with this, who know you and who know your brands, and they know how you show up. But I'm also excited for the people who may learn about you and your mindset and what you're building with your brands and adjacent to them. I think it's going to be super cool. So yeah, I know, right? Like,
said, I'm trying. I hope anybody listening that I didn't like go too off the grain, or like, because like I said, and this is just like a appreciation to you, because like the small business life is just, even before I started making sportswear, I wasn't even doing it. When I did the ADC stuff, I was like, I want to be like Off-White. I want to be like Supreme, Stussy, I was like, I don't care about making athletic wear. But then over time, it evolved because people are like, well, they were wearing my stuff to the gym. And I was like, why don't I just start making athletic wear? Which then me making athletic wear was like, people said, oh, well, you could be like a Gymshark or a Lululemon. And I was like, well, I love what they do, but I don't want to be like in that realm, because we were doing the athletic wear, and then that grew into golf. And I was like, I'm going to start doing golf stuff because I like golfing and stuff like that. And then we were like, okay. And then that grew into the running. And then now I've been doing the running for like 5 years. And it's like, that's going to have to become something else. I think now it's become a pillar within D17. And it's like, we can consistently keep building off of it, whether the running boom goes up or the running boom dies, it's going to stay. So it's not going nowhere. And then what does that look like? Like, you have to something's got to keep changing. And even from like up, top, down, or down to up, they're doing it as well. It's just, you don't see like me sitting at my desk with my head on the, like, oh my gosh, I don't know how to make a tech pack to make a singlet, stuff like that. But we have to make those mistakes to get to the next one. The same thing with like building those partnerships to get to the next one. Because if I didn't mess up on like 3 iterations of my running hat, I wouldn't have gotten to iteration 4. Or if I didn't go running and get inspired by the outdoors, I wouldn't have thought to get into trail, which then influenced a lot of my colorways, AKA my army green hoodie. So it's like, it's always something that comes around. And like we mentioned before, it's always building those blocks, but also making those connections. but also like willing to fail. But also it's like, take the wins when you get them. Like, even if I get a email back, I'm like, oh, something. Or like, if I get 10 orders in a day, some days I might get 0, some days I might get 5, some days I might get 25. It's like, people are still interested. When I hit 1,000 followers, I thought I should be at 10,000 by now. I was like, I'll take the 1,000, because if I sat in a room with 1,000 people and they all said, I think we like you, that's crazy to think about in retrospect, because I'd rather take 1,000, you know, followers and have like a 20% engagement rate than have like 10,000 and have like a 0.3 engagement rate, because I want to connect with people. That's always what I've done with the brand, is creating opportunity through sport, which is through bringing in a photographer. They might have not really developed their portfolio, but just come shoot some stuff, man. I don't care. Like, come make some reels or something. You can shoot the behind the scenes of the shoot we're doing. Somebody that hasn't gotten into running, we're getting them into running. And then, like I said, we're using our community partners and partnerships to correctly get them in and retain them, because now they know where to get the correct footwear. They now know where to get the correct hydration. They now know where to get the correct apparel. If it's somebody that's coming to, any of our pop-ups, they know when they come, my POS works. Like, there were times that like I was literally typing it in my phone, like their credit cards and stuff. And I'm like, okay, we got to figure it out. What did I do? I literally emailed Shopify. I was like, please help me with my POS. They sent me my little tap and chip for free. They literally said, here, now we have it figured out. You know what I mean? Like, sometimes you just got to ask and just reach out, because I always tell this to people, and I'll keep it at this because I'll talk for another 15 minutes. Somebody's got the answer. What I'm doing is not new. It's not new. It's in a way that it feels new, but there's so many, like I tell people, I'm like Palace, but I'm also kind of like Kith, but I'm also kind of like Supreme, but I'm also kind of like Nike, but I'm also kind of like, New Balance, but I'm also kind of like Solomon, but I'm also kind of like, A24, but I'm also kind of, it's just like you pick so many things from so many places, but then when you put it together, it looks different. But people don't know where it all came from. Like, it's so many things, and intention, and like you said, typefaces, and where that's pulling from. People don't know. Well, they know. All my commercials are just Adult Swim commercials, because I sat up all night watching Adult Swim as a kid. I love the satirical bullshit of Adult Swim commercials. So that's what built up the lo-fi, this, that, the sounds we play at the events, the typefaces that we use is in social posts or whatever. How I speak, it's very much reflected in the copy. And then it all just comes together to be what it is. Now it's up to me to push it, but it takes all those 1,300 people on my Instagram to, keep it moving. So I'll stop there. I'll keep going all day.
Great. Well, I want to make sure people can follow up, right, in the journey, right? So where should people find you and find D17 if they want to join in?
Me is just D17 Terrance. Every platform. Clothing is D17 Clothing on all platforms. If you want to come run, it's just D17 Running on all platforms. You can find me on TikTok. I'll be live on there all the time. Instagram, X, Facebook, Strava, Discord. Come find me. Let's have a conversation. My Calendly's open too. So
I love that, dude. Well, thank you again, man. And I'm excited for people to kind of follow along, jump in on the journey, and I hope they get to have the opportunity to interact with you in person and what you're building.
I'm telling you, once these races start, I'm like Batman when it comes to the races. There's so many pictures that I just be like in the cut. They'd be like, I didn't know you were there. I was like, yeah, I was just standing off in the corner, like on the hill, just like with my arms crossed, just like watching, because I'm so invested in like the races and stuff. Like, that was me at Baltimore last year when I finished. I just was like I think I was at mile like 19 or something. I just was standing by myself, just watching. They're like, what is he doing? I'm like, you know, I love the game. So I'm like, I want to see how people are doing and stuff like that. And so I'll be around. Don't please approach me. I have a serious dead face, but like I'm very approachable.
I love it. On that note, well, thanks again, man. Yeah, we'll put this out soon and get the party started.
Thank you again to Terrance of D17 for talking with me today, and thank you to you as a listener for joining in and sharing your thoughts on the process as well. At Small Brand Mentality, we're here to kind of celebrate and widen the aperture of how people view the idea of creating and destroying and rebuilding and just disrupting in this industry as a whole. And there's so many visions and executions of it. Appreciate you joining us for the journey. Please like and subscribe and read on the Substack if you can. We're happy to have you, and we'll see you next time.